Don't pick them up too much or you'll spoil them. I feel like that's one of those pieces of advice that just gets passed down through the generations, whether it's right or not. And now, as a new grandparent, I'll admit I've caught myself wondering, okay, what actually is true here? Because as it turns out, those everyday moments like holding a baby and responding when they cry aren't just comforting. Researchers now say that they're shaping how a child's brain develops, how they handle stress, and even how their body functions over time. At the University of Maryland, Baltimore, Dr. Lisa Berlin is studying how those earliest relationships can influence a child's lifelong health. Berlin is the Alison L. Richman Professor of Children and Families at the University of Maryland School of Social Work and an expert in early child to caregiver attachment. She is also an MPower Professor as part of her collaborative research with colleagues at the University of Maryland College Park. Today on the UMB Pulse, I sit down with Dr. Berlin to talk about how a simple home-based parenting program is helping caregivers get those early moments right and why it matters more than we might think.
You're listening to the heartbeat of the University of Maryland, Baltimore, the UMB Pulse.
So, Lisa, welcome to the UMB Pulse podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
No, we are happy to have you. And as a mom of 5 and now a grandma, that 2 of my children have had babies in the last 3 years. We now have 5 grandchildren. I'm learning, apparently, I don't know as much as I thought I knew about raising kids. I'm hoping today you'll, open my eyes a little bit and certainly help our listening population understand all that there is with talking to and interacting with young children. Lisa, let's start today by helping me and our listeners understand what that means, what attachment security is, and how we can best as parents and grandparents help our children and our grandchildren to develop this.
First of all, congratulations on becoming a grandparent. That is an amazing gift for all involved. Well, my whole program of research is rooted in decades of research, and not necessarily my own, a lot of which, came before me, that demonstrates the importance of the earliest years, of children's earliest environments, and especially of children's earliest relationships for both short and long-term development. So given that, and the fact that infants and children can't vote, and that I realize that's a big jump to make, but my concern is with doing all that we can to protect and promote and support those earliest relationships. So for me, that means providing day to day, that means providing and evaluating and disseminating programs that support those early relationships, and especially that support infant attachment security. And what we mean by that is not whether or not a baby is attached to their caregiver or caregivers. Most are in one form or another, but we want the form that is secure, that is a relationship where the baby understands that they can rely on their caregiver to take care of them in times of both distress and non-distress, and really look to them as what is called a secure base and a safe haven. So a safe haven in times of distress or trouble, which, for a baby can mean a lot of different things, but also in times of exploring. The job of a baby is to explore their immediate environment. So sometimes, supportive caregiving means just pushing that toy or object that a baby is reaching for just a little closer into their grasp, or moving things out of the way when they're just learning how to crawl or walk by themselves, or certainly picking them up when they're crying, especially in the very first year of life. Those are the caregiving behaviors that promote a secure attachment, and those are the caregiving behaviors that the programs I am most interested in are designed to support.
And what is the ABC program that you're working with, and what are the long-term impacts of that research?
ABC is an acronym for Attachment and Biobehavioral Catch-up. It is a parent coaching program, brief, 10 sessions, but pretty intensive in that it involves a parent coach working one-on-one with a parent or caregiver in their home or virtually over telehealth for 10 specific sessions that really aim to educate and help parents practice and master these kind of supportive parenting behaviors that we often call sensitive parenting behaviors. So they are really maximizing their ability to serve as a secure base and a safe haven for their youngest children. I would say the ABC program is the one with the strongest evidence base and with the greatest potential for broad dissemination for a few reasons. One is the evidence base. Two is the fact that it's of short duration. And three is that it has very strict rules for what is called program fidelity. So people who work as parent coaches pass through a strict screening protocol before they become trained and a strict certification protocol in the course of being trained, careful supervision, and then recertification every 2 years. And I think that level of quality control really helps ensure that ABC is always delivered as intended and feeds its continually positive results and makes it, in my eyes, the best candidate of these kinds of programs to work with and to scale up. And ABC is really kind of on fire right now. I think it's in at over half of the states in the US in one form or another, meaning in a couple states it's actually being implemented statewide, and I believe 11 countries worldwide at last count.
So, as a new grandparent, I can imagine those early months come with a lot of uncertainty. I sort of remember back that far. What kinds of questions or challenges are you hearing from families that you are working with?
Right now, my collaborators and I are working most closely with low-income Latina moms on the east side of Baltimore. And as I'm sure you know, they are feeling pretty challenged right now and receiving messages that are not necessarily positive about who they are and what we do. So, being able to tune that out and focus on child rearing, I think is a big task right now.
Are they looking to you to provide specific parenting answers?
That is what we show up to do. So when they agree to be in the program and to be in the study that we're conducting to evaluate the program in that community, they understand that it's focused on, specific parenting tools, if you will.
Okay, okay. And I understand that you don't have definitive results in yet. It's all a work in progress. But during your research so far, tell us what types of things are you actually measuring? What are you trying to figure out if it's working?
Well, the first thing that we're measuring is actual parenting behavior. And we do that through observational video recorded assessments of the moms and their babies, both before and after they've received the program, and in comparison to a randomly assigned control group that does not receive the ABC program. So we have lots and lots of video of observed parenting behaviors. That's our first outcome of interest. But in this particular study, given quite concerning early physical health disparities in low-income Latino children, we're also looking at health behaviors that are both very much part of early attachment relationships, such as feeding and sleeping, that also predict children's future physical health outcomes. So we're interested in what we call baby BMI, which is the proportion, baby's proportion of their weight to their length. So the extent to which they're, roughly at a reasonably healthy weight early in life. There are, concerns about obesity prevention in this community. So one of the things that we're looking at is feeding behavior and sleeping and baby weight in proportion to their length. We're also looking at immune system function when the kids turn 2 years old. Look at the extent to which we're seeing any kind of systemic inflammation that can forecast later health concerns.
Interesting. Are there any things that have kind of surprised you along the way?
Well, I got excited about working with this ABC program for a few reasons, one of which was somewhat surprising. So just to be clear, this is not my program. It was developed by colleague Mary Dozier at the University of Delaware. So just, about an hour up the road from here, especially for families with children who had experienced adversity. So maybe concerns about maltreatment or early institutional rearing in countries outside of the US, so internationally adopted infants and toddlers. So the ABC program has really caught fire, I think, because of its combination of being short yet intensive and having a strong evidence base. So I got interested in kind of working with the program in a more preventive way, working with the program specifically with Latina families. And in the meantime, I'm watching Dr. Dozier and her team's findings after findings showing increasingly long-term effects, positive impacts of ABC participation when kids are 10 and 12 years old after 10 sessions during infancy. So I don't know if that surprised me. It makes sense. It's consistent with what we'd expect and what we'd want, but that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that stood out to me is the idea that you spoil a baby by picking them up. I mean, I heard that when I was a young mom, and I'm hearing it now. And I'll admit, even as a grandparent, it's something, we all wonder about.
Yes, I'm glad you asked. The research that shows the positive impacts of what we call nurturance, providing soothing and support in response to distress. And what the research shows is that the more you do that, the less that babies cry. They're not getting spoiled or difficult. They're learning that there are people around them who will help them calm down when they're upset and who will teach them that they too have the ability to calm themselves down. So there's kind of a transfer of effect. So that's a very important message to get out there, especially in the first year of life when crying is one of infants, most direct forms of communication and one of their few forms of communication.
Well, kind of along that same line, you've said that brain development isn't exactly your focus and that babies are growing, I think you had said 1 million neural connections per second. What's happening to the brain during those early interactions when either a parent tells their child to use their words to explain what they're upset about, or when they're physically present to take them maybe, and I guess this would be a little bit of an older child than maybe a 1-year-old, but taking them to like an open gymnastics class and they're holding their hand on the balance beam instead of trying to force them to do it alone. How's that all connected?
Well, the more consistently those kind of supportive behaviors, caregiving behaviors happen, the more that infants and children develop an expectation. This is what's going to happen. Every time I get upset or I try to do something, there's someone here to soothe me. There's someone here to support me. So it becomes efficient to rely on our expectations, right? Instead of figuring it out in every situation. So the more the situations give the same message, the more that we expect, we think, we act on the presumption that, okay, you've got my back. People around me are mainly supportive, and new people who I meet are going to be supportive. So the idea is that, these expectations start to become kind of a pattern of thinking, a way of behaving based on those expectations that then, you know, continue to guide thinking, behavior, and future interactions and relationships.
Right, right.
It's a very early, infancy and the early childhood years are a very plastic time of development. We are, extremely easily influenced during that time as we try to make sense of our world. So what our earliest brains are doing is trying to put all this information together and understand what is happening in my world, who are these people around me on whom I am completely dependent, and what are they teaching me about how relationships can and should function. We take that information and we bring it forward. It helps to explain why people are confident or less secure, for example, in new social situations.
Hmm. Yeah, when I think of the adults I know, it makes me wonder, right? Your research, Lisa, connects these early relationships not just to emotional development, as you mentioned earlier, but also to things like sleep and stress and immune health. How are they connected? Can you dive into that a little more?
Yes, I love that question. I like to think about what we expect as a chain reaction, where we're trying to promote maximally supportive parenting behaviors, which then support infants' stress regulation, right? If you think of crying and response to crying, that's a small concrete example of regulating stress. I'm upset and you help me become less upset. A well-regulated system is a healthier system. A well-fed, well-rested system is a healthier system. So there's our chain reaction from parenting to stress regulation to physiological regulation as the basis for long-term physical health, including immune system functioning. That is the hypothesis that our current study is testing with these East Baltimore kiddos.
Okay. And when you think about that long-term impact, how do you think that these early relationships shape the outcomes later in life?
Yeah, well, I think they have the opportunity to be a protective factor. When attachments are secure, when early parenting is consistently supportive, then I think it works as a protective system, helping children be regulated, learn how to regulate themselves, especially their most intense feelings, and eat well and sleep well and function more healthily long term. this is not to say that if you're not securely attached as an infant, or you don't have ideally supportive early experiences, that you're doomed during your teenage or adult years. But I think it does harken back to the famous quote of Frederick Douglass that it is easier to build strong children than to fix broken men. I think if we provide early, preventive, supportive resources, that protects human development. And if we don't, then we will likely be investing more resources later to help people heal from adverse, problematic, traumatic experiences. I think that's pretty clear.
As someone now watching this through a grandparent lens, I can't help but think it makes me wonder about all those small moments differently. You know, if caregivers and whether it's parents or grandparents take a couple of important things from your research, what would you want us to take away?
Well, that's a great question because it brings all this research to, the real world, the real people day to day. Um, so I would say two things. One is pick up the crying baby. Don't worry about spoiling the baby. Pick them up and hold them close and then go from there. Most likely, that baby is going to cry less and less as time goes on and as their security and their confidence builds. But the other thing I would say is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, meaning all this parenting research information that we now have in 2026 is quite powerful, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming and overpowering of just day-to-day good enough parenting interactions. I would say aim to be a good enough parent, and that really, not a perfect parent. A good enough parent really is good enough.
How long will your research continue? And will there be like a second phase that accompanies what you're doing?
Oh, yes. Well, Dr. Dozier is always an advisor. The ABC program is still her baby. And we're very fortunate to work directly with her. But actually, my main collaborator is Natalie Slopin. Dr. Slopin and I met when she was at the University of Maryland School of Public Health. She's now at the Harvard School of Public Health. She is an epidemiologist by training who really is the leader in our study in thinking about social determinants of health and how early relationships and attachments might relate to children's physical health outcomes. So we're at the point where we just finished recruiting participants into our study. We have 245 participants that I'm very excited to have. And we expect to be wrapping up our post-program data collection in the next about year and analyzing our program impacts during that time. And maybe thinking about a follow-up study with these families as well.
Great. Yeah, something far down the line would be interesting. Dr. Berlin, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge with us today and helping us understand what's being done in the area of childhood research. And we look forward to learning more and learning more, especially when your data is in. I'm going to sign off and go hold one of my grandbabies and give them a cuddle, even if my daughter thinks I'm spoiling them.
Well, thank you, Dana. Thank you so much. It's always fun to talk about these things.
While Dr. Berlin's current study focuses on Latina mothers and infants in East Baltimore, the bigger goal stretches far beyond one neighborhood or one group of families. Researchers are now looking at how programs like ABC, the Attachment and Biobehavioral Catch-up, could eventually expand existing early childhood systems across Maryland and beyond.
There's a couple questions to resolve there. One is referrals. What's the best way to create a kind of consistent pipeline of families who are interested, who know about ABC and who are interested in receiving it, so that there's always a good matchup. If we have ABC parent coaches available, if we're building capacity in that regard, then we want them to be busy all the time. I think some combination of public and private resources will be required. And, one thing that might be a good model is to embed ABC in existing early childhood programs that cover a lot of bases but don't necessarily support caregiving and attachment as rigorously as does ABC. So here I'm thinking about Head Start, for example, which is quite comprehensive in many ways, but doesn't support caregiving, parenting behaviors, attachment security this precisely or impactfully. Or, for example, the Judy centers that are spread throughout the state of Maryland could be an interesting platform and group of collaborators.
For Berlin, this research is ultimately about prevention, investing early in children and families before bigger struggles emerge later in life.
This goes back to the body of research that I talked about in the very beginning, which really links supportive, secure, early experiences and development to later social skills, mental health, attentional skills, kind of soft school skills in young children, language skills even in children we're seeing as a result of ABC and linked to early attachment security.
And despite the stress many families are facing today, Berlin says the parents she works with continue to give her hope.
With all the parents I work with, I can't think of anything they want more urgently than for their child or their children to be okay. And when I look at the moms we're working with now, for example, who are really under tremendous strain, and see them eagerly being present for their children, being sweetly nurturing to their babies, it is really inspiring and gives me hope more than anything.
You can learn more about Dr. Lisa Berlin's research in the ABC Parenting Program at umaryland.edu/breakthroughs, or find a link in our show notes. For the UMB Pulse, I'm Charles Chalet.
The UMB Pulse with Charles Chalet and Dana Rampolla is a UMB Office of Communications and Public Affairs production. Edited by Charles Chalet, marketing by Dana Rampolla.